Hey guys, tonight we journey through something deceptively simple, yet rich with history. We're clambering into a four-poster bed. No, tonight you're lying down, under the open stars, unwoven fibers, or maybe even bare earth, letting the warm breeze whisper across your face. Imagine this. It's dusk in the Sahel, maybe 800 years ago. The sun's last breath has painted the sky a buttery orange, and the ground is still warm under your toes. You're tired, not? Netflix and chill. Tired, but I carried firewood for 6 miles tired. And what's waiting for you? A mat. Simple, flat, probably woven by your aunt from stalks of wild grass or palm fronds. The kind you can roll up and shake out before sleep. There's no pillow, no fan, just the quiet buzz of insects, the nearby snort of a goat, and maybe your cousin snoring already. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing who's drifting off with me from across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie flat on the mat, staring at a sky that swallowed the last sunlight. There's no street lamp here, no car hum, just the night. In this early slice of human history, long before colonial beds or designer mattresses, people across what we now call West Africa had figured out the basics. You need something between you and the crawling critters, the dust, and the roots, but not too much. Something cool, breathable, flexible. Historians still argue whether these early mats were mostly utilitarian or already held cultural value. Were they sacred objects, or just grass stitched together for comfort? What's agreed on is that materials varied wildly depending on region. Coastal communities might use raffia palm, savanna people might favor millet stalks, or even tree bark fibers. You reach out and run your hand along the surface. It's rough, but not unpleasant, kind of like sleeping on a flattened basket. Sleep wasn't just rested with safety. Lying in a group, often in circular patterns, was a way of keeping predators at bay, both the toothy kind and the human kind. That communal sleep feeling, it goes way back. It's the kind of arrangement where grandma, 3 cousins, and the family chicken might all share a mat or two. Try pulling that off in a modern studio apartment. And mats weren't always on the ground. Sometimes they were laid over a raised earthen platform, a kind of proto-bed frame that kept you off the damp floor during the rainy season. Other times, a mat was your only shelter during travel. Roll it, carry it, unroll it, repeat. Basically, the yoga mat of ancient village life, but with fewer downward dogs and more actual goats. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a night. Between the mosquitoes, the lack of padding, and the hole, you're sharing your bed with half your extended family situation. Modern comfort might feel far, far away, but there's something to be said for this simplicity. You sleep close to the earth, under a canopy of stars, with no Wi-Fi waves trying to melt your brain. Just the mat, just your body, just the rhythm of breath in and out. And because sleep wasn't isolated to nighttime, you might nap in the heat of day, under a baobab tree or inside a shaded hut. The mat was always ready, always near. Its portability was its power. Mats were tools for life, for prayer, childbirth, storytelling, mourning, and yes, snoring. Quirky fact incoming. In some regions, people would tuck herbs or sacred leaves under their sleeping mats, maybe for scent, maybe for protection, maybe because someone's aunt swore it kept away evil spirits. Whether it worked or not, well, that's still up for debate. But tonight, you've got a leaf of lemongrass under your shoulder. Just go with it. Your mind starts to wander as your body softens against the weave of fibers. You're not just a visitor. You're one of them, wrapped in a thread of memory that goes back centuries. And as your breathing slows, you wonder if someone, centuries from now, will lie down in a strange and different world and remember you. You wake up, figuratively, to the soft sound of weaving. Not machines clanking or looms thudding, but the patient, rhythmic whisper of palm strands being twisted, pulled, and threaded through rough fingers. You're not in a bed. You're seated, cross-legged beside someone, maybe an auntie, maybe a grandmother who's been doing this for decades. Her hands are strong, calloused, and impossibly fast. She doesn't need to look at them anymore. They remember. You're learning the craft now, whether you meant to or not. The materials are simple. Raffia fibers stripped from the inside of palm fronds, softened and soaked. Sometimes she adds dye-natural stuff made from tree bark or crushed roots, earthy reds, dusty yellows, maybe even indigo, if it's a lucky day and someone brought some back from the market. But mostly, it's just the straw-colored tan of nature, unbothered and timeless. You don't have scissors, but you do have a knife with a blade that's seen better days. The mat maker slices through stalks with practiced precision, lining them up in bundles, tying, knotting, weaving. Each section interlocks like a puzzle, tight enough to support your weight, loose enough to breathe. Historians still argue whether these weaving patterns crosshatch, herringbone, spiral, were simply decorative or served to identify specific households, clans, or even regions. Some believe mats acted like a social signature. Lie down on this, and your family. Others think it was just about what felt good under your shoulder blade. Either way, the results are beautiful, even if no one's calling it interior design. You shift slightly and realize that you're sitting on a pile of finished mats, stacked like pancakes. There's a rhythm here, not just in the weaving, but in the daily life it supports. A mat for sleeping, a mat for guests, a mat for childbirth, a mat for washing your face, heck, a mat for gossip. Don't think people didn't have designated spots for that. The weaver chuckles when you try a few stitches. Yours look like spaghetti. She pats your hand. You're doing fine. Kind of. Maybe. There's an odd sort of intimacy in this craft. It's not just practical, it's intergenerational. Knowledge handed down from mother to daughter, sometimes father to son, but mostly passed through the quiet patience of women's work. And it wasn't always voluntary. In some places, girls had to master weaving before they were considered ready for marriage. No mats, no husbands. Romantic, quirky tidbit. Some weavers would sing while they worked, not just to pass the time, but to keep rhythm. The songs could be lullabies, praise chants, or thinly veiled grumbles about in-laws. Basically, the first musical podcasts. Occasionally, they'd even weave a strand of dyed fiber in a specific pattern to tag the mat. Sort of like a maker's mark, or maybe a little jab at the competition down the road. And the hours. Brutal. If you're trying to meet a market deadline, you might work from before sunrise to after dark, hunched over in ways your chiropractor would not approve of. You glance at your own posture now. Yikes. Maybe straighten your back a bit. You take in the smell, the dry, grassy scent of raffia, mixed with sweat, clay, and the faint perfume of whatever someone's cooking 2 huts over. There's a goat bleating somewhere nearby. You think it's yelling at you specifically. It might be. A child tumbles into the weaving space, barefoot and full of giggles, dragging a half-rolled mat behind him like a superhero cape. The weaver doesn't flinch. She just keeps moving, one strand at a time, like a metronome. You sense that she's made hundreds of these in her life, maybe more. She doesn't count. There's no Shopify store, no branding strategy, no sales funnel. Just people who need sleep, and people who know how to help. As the sun gets lower, she finishes another mat and sets it beside the others. It looks like nothing, but it's everything. It's shelter, privacy, a resting place, a birthing ground, a farewell cushion. It might even be someone's only possession, and yet it costs nothing but time, skill, and dried grass. You reach out to touch the finished edge. It's smoother than you expected, flexible, but sturdy. If you had to sleep on it tonight, you wouldn't complain. Much. Weaving mats isn't glamorous. No empire was built on it. No famous general praised its virtues before battle. But in a quiet, slow way, these mats held entire lives. They were the literal fabric of the home. And you're starting to understand what that means. Night falls again. This time, it's a different village, maybe the same region, maybe centuries later. But the sky is still full of stars, and you're back on the mat. You're lying flat on your back, hands over your belly, staring into the vast dark above, when someone whispers nearby. Not a casual whisper, but something lower, deeper, reverent. You're not just resting anymore. You're sharing space with spirits. Not the scary movie kind, no. Vengeful ghosts, here but ancestral. Ones. The kind who know your name, your grandmother's name, and how badly you danced at last season's harvest festival. They're woven into the air, into the stories, and into the mat beneath your spine. See. In many West African cultures, sleeping wasn't just biological, it was spiritual. Lying down was a vulnerable act. You're off your feet, eyes closed, breath slowed. That's when your spirit could wander, maybe even get snatched. That's why certain herbs were burned at bedtime. That's why some mats were anointed. That's why some children slept near elders to stay tethered. Historians still argue whether this spiritual layer of sleep was rooted in indigenous religion, ancestor worship, or protective ritual. Likely, it was all three. Belief systems weren't compartmentalized. Sleep wasn't just sleep. It was a doorway. Tonight, you're lying on a mat with symbols stitched into its pattern. Not fancy, not flashy, just deliberate. Maybe it's a motif representing the river your people crossed generations ago. Maybe it's the twisted rope of the clan lineage. Or maybe, according to the family elder, it's a snake, but not a bad snake, just one who knows secrets. You nod slowly. You're not in a position to argue snake politics. You're offered something to place under your pillow or, in your case, under your elbow, a little sachet filled with dried leaves and ash. It's supposed to ward off bad dreams. You're told not to open it. Obviously, you do. It smells like burnt mango peel and mystery. Still, you tuck it back in, just in case. Quirky tidbit, in some areas, people believed that if you slept with your head pointing west, you'd have clearer dreams. Pointing north, confusing dreams. East, dreams about relatives. South, you'd dream of goats. It's unclear whether that last one was literal or metaphorical, but you'll take your chances. Tonight, your mat is facing southwest, which might mean prophetic goats. Fantastic. You start to notice how different generations relate to the mat. The elders sit up straighter, leaning against their arms like their bodies remember things you've never learned. Children fall asleep mid-sentence, curled around each other like puppies. And the middle-aged folks, they lie back and stare into the dark with that "I have 5 people relying on me and no rice left" kind of sigh. You hear a soft chant begin. It's not a song, not exactly. More like a cadence, maybe a call to the ancestors, maybe just a sleep ritual. You don't know the words, but you feel the rhythm, like waves, like weaving, like breath. And here's something quietly profound. Many communities saw dreams as more than subconscious noise. They were communication, guidance, warnings. If a dream told you to avoid a journey, you canceled it. If it told you to plant yams early, you did. And if it warned you about a neighbor, well, let's just say you'd keep your gossip to yourself. Mats became part of that ritual landscape. Not just where dreams happened, but how they happened. You didn't dream on bare ground. That was rude, unsafe, spiritually unwise. The mat was a barrier, a conduit, a filter, sort of like a spiritual screen protector. You roll to your side now, head resting on your arm, and you notice something unexpected. There's a chicken nestled up next to your legs, just vibing. You don't remember when it got there. You don't remember hearing it settle in. But it's asleep, too. Snoring, maybe. You feel oddly reassured. You and the chicken soul siblings on a shared mat. Suddenly, someone stirs beside you and mutters in their sleep. A string of words, gentle and half-formed. Maybe a dream, maybe a memory, maybe both. You're not sure anymore where the edges are between waking and sleep, between now and then, between you and those who came before. That's the mat's magic. It holds you up, gently, but it also lowers you into the realm of dreams, of spirits, of stories older than writing. And just as your breath begins to even out, someone lightly brushes dust from your mat, not for cleanliness, for respect, because someone important slept here once, And maybe, just maybe, they're not entirely gone. You're walking now, not far, not hurried, just keeping pace with the breeze across the dry grasslands. The sun is low, golden, stretching shadows across the dusty track ahead. You're with a group of travelers, nomads, Fulani, most likely, judging by the cattle trailing behind like sleepy shadows, their horns making slow punctuation marks against the sky. Everything they own moves with them: calabashes, cookware, carved wooden headrests, woven baskets, and, yes, mats, rolled tightly and slung over shoulders, strapped to donkeys, or tied across pack animals' backs like flat, floppy scrolls. No one's leaving their sleep behind. That would be ridiculous. Your feet crunch against cracked earth. Someone offers you a gourd of water. Someone else, an older woman in a sky blue wrapper, glances at your shoes and mutters something about soft feet. Fair. You've never had to follow a herd 20 miles just to find a watering hole. You're a guest here, and your calves are already plotting revenge. When camp is made for the night, it's fast, efficient. Fires are lit, water fetched, children corralled. The sun isn't even gone yet, and mats are already unfurling like sleepy magic carpets. You help roll one out, a woven sheet of grass, thick in the center and tapered at the ends. Simple, light, reliable. This is where sleeping mats truly shine. On the move, not just sleeping surfaces, but impromptu tables, prayer platforms, windbreaks, and rain covers. Some can even be turned into a sort of sling to carry small children or gear. Swiss Army knives, please. These mats had range. Historians still argue whether nomadic mat styles influenced settled communities or vice versa. Did the sleek, travel-friendly designs of the Fulani inspire broader West African mat making? Or did the nomads adapt mats they saw during seasonal market visits? The truth, like most good stories, is probably somewhere in the middle, woven from both threads. Tonight, as twilight settles in, you watch a young boy roll onto his mat beside his mother. No sheets, no pillow, just a thin cloth tucked over his shoulder. He's asleep within seconds. You wonder how. Then you hear it, the lullaby of travel. Not music, but the ambient sounds of motion paused. Cowbells clinking in the breeze. Soft footfalls. Someone coughing in the distance. Someone else telling a story about a snake that turned into a well. You lie down on your own mat. It smells like straw and smoke and long journeys. The kind of smell you'll never find in a candle, no matter how hard boutique shops try. Quirky tidbit. Some nomads would draw patterns in the dust under their mat: circles, spirals, dots. It was said to confuse spirits who might follow them during the night. Kind of like ancient password protection, but with more geometry. There's a sense of humility here. Sleep isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. But even necessities can be made beautiful. A finely woven mat trimmed in dyed raffia, or patched with years of careful repairs. A quiet badge of care, not wealth, not status, but attention. You sleep better knowing someone made this for you, or for themselves, or both. A breeze picks up. The mat shifts slightly beneath you, and you realize you're sleeping in the same position, on the same material, under the same stars as someone did centuries ago. Nothing fancy, just enough, just right. There are no walls here, just the sky and the hum of tired breath. You feel both exposed and protected. Soft under the stars, yet grounded. You know the group will move again tomorrow. You'll roll your mat up and carry it again. But for now, it's unrolled. It's waiting. And it feels a little like home. One of the herders ties their mat into a makeshift sunshade for a baby, stringing it between two saddles. Another folds theirs into a seat to grind millet, multi-purpose, ingenious, dusty, but dependable. You think back to your life, your mattress, your fan, your nightstand full of tangled chargers, and yet, here, on this woven square of dry grass, You're more grounded than you've been in months. No screens, no lights. Just the gentle rhythm of a life, always in motion. And when someone begins singing low, in a language you don't know, you smile. Because even in movement, even under the endless West African sky, the mat stays. Quiet, present, rolled and unrolled again, like a promise kept. You wake to the smell of millet porridge bubbling over a fire. Smoke curls lazily into the air, and around you, the camp is already stirring. Mats are being rolled up, shaken off, tied down. But today, you're not moving on. You're headed into a village, bigger, older, settled. The kind with houses clustered close together, courtyards swept clean with stiff brooms, and walls made of sun-dried clay. As you step through a narrow alleyway into someone's home compound, you realize you're about to see the full spectrum of mat life, from the humble to the regal. You've arrived at the cross-section, where royalty and daily labor sleep under the same stars, but on very different mats. Inside the compound, you're shown into a shaded veranda, where a mat lies spread across a smooth, raised mud platform. It's not elaborate, not glittering with beads or anything fancy, but the weave is fine, tight, polished. Even the edges are wrapped in a thin strip of dyed leather. This isn't just a sleeping mat. It's a statement. You're told this one is for the head of the household, not just because he paid for it, but because he inherited it. That's right, some mats weren't just used. They were passed down, slept on by fathers and grandfathers, rolled and unrolled across decades. Sort of like inheriting your granddad's recliner, except flatter, and with fewer beer stains. Historians still argue whether the distribution of sleeping mats within a household mirrored broader hierarchies, patriarchal, class-based, or spiritual. In some communities, the mat size and placement were indicators of a person's status. Larger mat near the fire. That's grandma. Thin mat beside the door. That's the cousin still proving himself. Some believe even the mat's direction mattered, line north-south to honor ancestors, or placed east-west to catch the early light. Now you're invited into a larger structure, a chieftain's hall, maybe even a small palace. The floor here is covered not with one mat, but layers, overlapping, colorful, hand-dyed mats, arranged like tapestry on the ground. You instinctively walk around them. You don't step on a chief's mat unless you want to get yelled at by someone holding a ceremonial staff. Quirky detail. In certain regions, high-ranking individuals were given sleeping mats with tiny charms woven into them, beads, cowrie shells, or even talismans wrapped in fabric. These were believed to protect the sleeper from curses or ill-intentioned dreams. A sort of spiritual alarm system. Motion sensor sage, if you will. You notice the contrast now. Outside, among farmers and market sellers, mats are practical. They get dusty, stained, patched. Here in the chief's hall, mats are art, symbols, carefully preserved, and rarely slept on. Maybe that's the irony. The less a mat is used, the more valuable it becomes. Someone leans in and tells you a local proverb. A mat remembers who last sat upon it. It sounds poetic, until you realize they mean it literally. Body heat, dust prints, even the smell of someone's body oil. Mats tell stories. They keep secrets. And some of them are surprisingly opinionated. But don't get too high and mighty. With all this nobility, out back, behind the kitchens, you find the sleeping mats of the servants and seasonal workers. Thinner, worn, smooth in places, rolled up neatly in the corner. They're not fancy, but they're clean, respected, because everyone sleeps. Everyone dreams. Whether on a mat woven with cowries or stitched from leftover stalks, rest comes for all. One woman, older, gestures to her mat proudly. She made it herself, 20 years ago, and it's still holding together. A few patches, sure, but every fiber was pulled by her own hand. She pats it like it's a beloved pet. You believe her when she says it knows her better than anyone. And that's the quiet lesson. Today, Mats don't just divide rich from poor. They reveal the relationships people have with comfort, care, and continuity. Royal mats are preserved, like artifacts. Humble mats are lived in, patched with laughter, with spilled porridge, with a toddler's midnight accident. No mat is just a mat. You sit down on one in the shade, letting your fingers trace the patterns. It's not symmetrical. It doesn't have to be. It holds the weight of life's kings and cooks, elders and infants. Everyone eventually lies down. You look up, and for a moment, the whole village is breathing in unison. Fires crackle. Chickens mutter in their sleep. Someone coughs from deep inside a house, and on every mat, whether under a thatched roof or beneath open sky, another story waits to unfold. You're in a courtyard now, not quite inside, and not quite outside a threshold space. The air is thick with cooking smells, smoke, oil, and the sweet temps of ripe mango. But your guide isn't offering snacks today. No, she's motioning you toward a cluster of mats laid out side by side, some close, some spaced, just enough to imply, well, something intimate. Tonight, you're entering a household with multiple wives, and if you're wondering what sleeping mats have to do with polygamy, the answer is everything. Here, a man doesn't just rotate affection, he rotates mats. You watch as he enters the compound, removes his sandals, and pauses. The wives already know whose turn it is. The mat closest to the inner wall has been smoothed out, dusted, maybe even sprinkled with a little scent. A quiet invitation. Historians still argue whether these rotation systems were formalized across cultures, or more improvised. Negotiated nightly with a bit of side-eye, and a plate of the man's favorite stew. In some places, mat scheduling was meticulous 7 wives, meant a weekly calendar. In others, well, let's just say emotional intelligence was key. Or there were many awkward mornings. You're told it wasn't just about fairness, it was about reputation. Neglect one wife's mat for too long, and you weren't just in trouble at home. Word spread. Your name became a topic at the market stall. Suddenly, fewer people wanted to share yams with you. Tragic, each wife's mat tells its own story. Some are soft with age. Others are newer, stiffer, perhaps from a recent marriage. Some are adorned with dyed borders, or faint stitch marks, personal embellishments, to distinguish her space from the others. Because even shared husbands didn't mean shared everything. Quirky tidbit. In some households, wives would add subtle signs to their mat-steeny shells, charms, or scented herbs, to sweeten their turn. A form of romantic branding. This is the comfy one, it seems to say. The one you'll dream best on. Whether it worked, well, historians weren't taking surveys. But you can bet the competition was real. You glanced toward the corner where unused mats are neatly rolled. Some wives sleep alone that night, and that's part of the rhythm. It's not rotation, space, breathing room. Unless, of course, you were hoping for a romantic night, and instead, you get a mat and a chicken. Happens. But don't make the mistake of thinking the mat only represents physical intimacy. It also signaled emotional weight. Where a man chose to sleep whose mat he chose could affect family dynamics, inheritance politics, even community alliances. Mats carried meaning. They weren't just furniture. They were strategy boards. In one compound, you meet a woman who explains that her mat isn't just hers by marriage, it's hers by right. Dowry negotiations, mat placement, shared meals, all of it mapped out long ago. The mat, to her, is a form of terrain. You defend it, she says with a smile, but gently. That gentle defense shows in how she cares for it. You see her brushing it out, laying a thin cloth over it, even tucking the corners down so the wind doesn't flip them. Ritual, habit, love, all three. You overhear laughter from one of the younger wives. She's teasing another about the slippery mat. Night, a story involving spilled palm oil and an unplanned tumble. The joke lands. Everyone laughs. Mats carry stories, too. Some of them hilarious. Others, whispered like folklore when the kids are asleep. And kids, let's not forget them. Children often slept beside their mothers, sometimes on separate mats, sometimes snuggled into the edge of the main one. So, in polygamous households, mats also defined family clusters. Wife 1 and her children, wife 2 and hers, like a floor map of relationships, drawn in raffia and foot indentations. There's something deeply human in this spatial choreography. Not perfect, not always peaceful, but navigated with unspoken rules and a lot of mutual awareness. You can almost see it as a dance mat's rolled out and rolled in, signaling more than just rest. They declare connection, affection, status, and yes, whose turn it is to claim the snoring husband. You lean back now, resting against a wall, warmed by the day's sun, and feel the quiet thrum of life in this layered household. Nothing looks exceptional from the outside, just mats, arranged in clusters, but, from your vantage point, it's a living diagram of love, duty, memory, and maneuvering. And when everyone finally lies down, the courtyard goes still. Not quite that, but still. The last candle flickers. A rooster sleep coughs. The mats rustle once, twice, then rest. The sun's back up, and you've barely had time to wipe the sleep from your eyes before someone's ushering you into a round mud hut. Not for a tour, this is your next place to sleep. It's early morning, but already there's talk of midday rest. The heat will be unbearable soon, and here, people nap like it's a sacred ritual. You're learning quickly. In West Africa, sleep happens when the world allows it, not necessarily when you want it. The hut is round, with thick, earthen walls and a conical thatch roof that catches the light in soft, golden streaks. A few openings near the top let warm air rise out, and every gust of breeze pushes a lazy spiral of dust across the packed dirt floor. It's not grand, it's not big, but it is perfect. At the center of the room lies a large mat, smooth and familiar. Around it, smaller ones, kid-sized maybe, or just secondary spots for midday guests or tired animals. You realize immediately, this space isn't segmented. No bedroom, no hallway, no locked door. Everyone sleeps together. One room, one rhythm. You sink down onto the mat and feel the slight give beneath your weight. It's been used soft at the edges, almost polished from decades of human sprawl. Here, the mat is more than a bed. It's the family table, the classroom, the gossip bench. It's where a child takes her first steps, and where her grandmother finally rests her tired knees. Historians still argue whether this kind of open mat-based sleeping promoted stronger kinship bonds, or just evolved from necessity. Probably both. What's clear is that these round rooms weren't accidents. The circular design kept airflow moving. Heat rose and escaped. Cold air stayed low. And the mat, usually placed dead center, meant everyone had equal access to the heart of the space. No corners to claim. No head of the table. Just you, your family, and maybe a goat or two, pretending not to snore. A baby gurgles beside you, tiny hands grasping at nothing. Someone covers her gently with a cloth and smooths her hair. You can't help but smile. There's a comfort here that runs deeper than thread count. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, children weren't allowed to sleep alone on their own mats until they passed. Certain rites like speaking full sentences or completing their first farming chore. Until then, they shared with a parent, grandparent, or older sibling. The mat was communal, and independence had to be earned, not assumed. As you lean back, you catch the faint scent of wood smoke soaked into the mat fibers. It smells like meals, eaten cross-legged, like lullabies hummed by tired mouths, like years of quiet breathing at night. There's no pillow here, no bed frame, just the mat, and yet it holds more intimacy than any mattress fortress ever could. It listens, it absorbs, it remembers the weight of everyone who's leaned on it. It doesn't take sides except maybe the cool one when the heat gets unbearable. A rooster shouts somewhere outside, clearly unimpressed with your attempt to relax. Someone laughs and throws a sandal. You've stopped checking your phone. You lost signal hours ago. But more importantly, you don't care anymore. There's no app for this kind of peace. The room begins to fill again. Kids return from chores. Women bring in pots of food. A man ducks in to rest his legs and drinks water from a shared gourd. And no one argues about space. No one marks territory. The mat stretches, breathes, shifts. You roll slightly to the side and make room. That's the unspoken miracle of the round room and its mat's elasticity of presence. The mat always seems to have one more corner for someone who needs it. No fancy guest linens. No, do not sit here signs. Just the timeless act of making space. And when the sun hits its peak and the world outside quiets into that dreamy midday hush, everyone together, apart, diagonally, upside down. If you're a child, settles into the mat for sleep. Some lie on their backs. Some curl into tiny commas. A toddler flops half off his mother's side and starts drooling immediately. It's chaos. It's perfect. You close your eyes, and for a while, you forget where your limbs end and someone else's begin. There's just the mat, the curve of the wall, the hum of insects, and the press of ancient rest folding around you like a soft, dry blanket. When night falls, again, it comes not with silence, but with rhythm, soft drumming from a neighboring compound, the shuffle of feet on dry earth, and the occasional cackle from a firelit conversation. You blink up at the stars, clearer now than you've ever seen them, but your gaze drops to something closer, something quieter. The mat's being moved outside. Yes, outside. Here's the thing, no one told you before your journey. In many West African households, sleeping outdoors is as natural as breathing, especially during dry seasons, when the air inside turns heavy and thick. The mats come out to breathe. At first, you think it's temporary, a kind of evening lounge setup. But no, this is full commitment. Mats are laid down on flat rooftops, verandas, or the smooth sun-baked courtyard floor. Whole families stretch out beneath the stars, heads nestled on rolled cloths, limbs angled for optimal breeze. It's a kind of minimalist luxury resort, if you ignore the occasional ant. And why not? The outdoor air is cooler. The moonlight is free. The sky, scattered with constellations that have had names longer than your country has had flag colors, becomes tonight's ceiling. Quirky tidbit. In some communities, there were unspoken rules about who got to sleep under which tree. Yes, even trees had sleeping zones. The biggest ones offered shade at dawn and drew cooler air at night. They weren't just part of the landscape, they were infrastructure. You quickly learn not to plop your mat beneath the baobab unless you're ready to be scolded for stepping on Auntie's cool spot. Historians still argue whether the widespread practice of outdoor sleeping was purely environmental or tied to spiritual beliefs. Was it simply about temperature, or did people sleep beneath the sky to stay connected to ancestral forces? Likely, both. After all, many West African cosmologies viewed the stars as more than lights, they were eyes. Memory, watchers of time. Tonight, as you unroll your borrowed mat outside, you're warned, gently, don't face your feet toward the elder's hut. You nod, of course. Respect flows through space here. Even how you point your toes matters. There's a kind of choreography to outdoor sleeping. Mats are placed with awareness. Elder men on the outer edge, children tucked near the center, mothers curling around babies. It's not rigid, but it is intentional. Proximity means safety. Familiar limbs touching in the dark mean comfort. And anyone who's rolled off a slanted roof mid-dream quickly learns the value of communal positioning. You lie back and stare up. The night is alive with murmurs, gossip, songs, whispers, and that one snorer who will absolutely not admit it in the morning. Laughter drifts from a group of girls braiding hair beneath a lantern. A man hums a tune, low and steady. You're not inside, but you've never felt more held. And the mat's simple. Woven mats do their job without complaint. They insulate against ground heat, cushion just enough to let your hips relax, and roll up quickly when the dew comes. You hear someone flip theirs over. The dry side is always waiting. Someone else claps theirs out like a rug. Another rolls, hers tighter to serve as a pillow. It's a ballet of fiber and habit. Not everyone stays out all night. Some will drift inside later, depending on the season, the insects, or their dreams. Others will stay till dawn, faces glazed in moonlight. Swaddled in the breath of the open world, you stay. Because in this moment, beneath this sky, on this mat that smells faintly of smoke and shea butter, you finally understand what it means to be both grounded and free. The sky presses gently against your chest. The earth breathes below you. And the mat, humble and enduring, becomes a bridge between the two. By the time morning creeps in again, it does so like a careful whisper warm air before light. The faint clang of metal pots, a distant goat complaining loudly about absolutely nothing. You open your eyes on the mat, still outside, and realize you've slept better than you have in weeks. There's a softness in your body, like the earth has gently pressed out all the tension. But your host's already on the move. The mats are being gathered, dusted off, rolled up. There's no ceremony, just practiced efficiency. Mats here aren't sacred in the religious sense, but they're treated with deep, quiet reverence. You watch as an older woman flicks her fingers across the edge of hers before rolling it. Not out of superstition, but affection, like someone folding an old, beloved coat. Back inside the compound, you're handed a calabash of warm millet porridge. You sip and nod, trying not to burn your tongue, while watching a teen girl add new fibers to a mat in progress. She's weaving, with split doom palm leaves, her fingers moving fast, rhythmic, like typing on a soft keyboard from centuries ago. This is your next lesson. The mat isn't just used, it's made. By hand. By people who rarely need rulers or patterns. From Mali to Ghana, from Senegal to Burkina Faso, mat making remains a humble, vital art form passed mostly from women to younger women, and occasionally from uncle to niece. The fibers used vary depending on region. In coastal areas, it might be raffia palm, inland, doom, or elephant grass. In some parts, even strips of recycled plastic find their way into the weave. Necessity plus ingenuity equals style. Historians still argue whether mat designs were once used as coded identifiers, almost like clan emblems, or, if that's a more recent interpretation, fueled by outsider romanticism. What we do know, certain patterns do carry meanings. Zigzags, diamond loops, tight concentric circles all hold stories, sometimes whispered into the weaving as it's done. Not for tourists, for continuity. And you realize, watching this girl work, mat making isn't separate from life. It is life. A girl learns to weave as she learns to cook, fetch water, and gossip. It's not a weekend hobby, it's everyday survival and creativity woven together. The same mat that holds a newborn today might be used at her wedding 10 years later, or as a shroud when her grandfather passes. Quirky tidbit. In some regions of Niger and northern Nigeria, girls traditionally wove miniature mats as love tokens, gifts for a favored boy. The size of your mat, and how cleanly you finished the edge, could tell your whole romantic intent. If the boy rolled it up and tucked it into his satchel, well, let's just say wedding drums might be warming up. If he left it on the dust, time to weave again. As the teen finishes her row, she leans back and stretches her spine with a yawn you deeply relate to. Someone calls her inside, and she tucks the half-made mat behind the doorway like a painting in progress. You peek closer. The weft is tighter than any fabric you've owned. The lines are straight, but not rigid. There's a softness in there. Order, like they've been made to curve around life's imperfections. Your host claps his hands and laughs. You want to try? Of course you do. He hands you a coil of dried doom and shows you how to split it with your thumbnail. Soften it with a splash of water and pass it over under. You last about 7 minutes before your fingers cramp, but he pats your shoulder anyway. Not bad for your first 100 years. You smile, sore and proud. There's something deeply meditative about the motion, something ancient. You don't need music, your own breath becomes the rhythm. Later, as more mats are rolled out for lunch, yes, again, you notice which ones are new and which are clearly decades old. Some have patched corners, others have delicate designs starting to fade, but all are functional. Beauty isn't separate from use here. Beauty is use. The idea that a mat could be both an object and an archive sits with you all afternoon. You start to see them everywhere now, not just on floors but wrapped around sleeping bundles, used as windbreaks against dusty gusts, even folded into pillows with a few strategic flips. They aren't accessories. They're architecture. You lie back down after lunch, your own mat borrowed, and now slightly more familiar. There's a warmth to it, not just from the sun, but from the hands that made it. And as your eyelids begin to drift once more, you wonder how many stories are trapped in these fibers. How many mothers soothed colicky babies here? How many arguments ended with, let's just lie down for a bit? How many lives stretched out across this same humble square of woven time? His sun shifts slowly now, easing from its harsh zenith toward something gentler, longer shadows, cooler breezes, a golden hue that makes the dust glow like powdered amber. And as it does, something almost magical happens in the compound. The mats come out again. Not for sleeping this time, but for everything else. This is your next quiet revelation. The mat is not just for night. In West African life, it's practically a room of its own, a space to rest, of course, but also to socialize. To grind millet, to braid hair, to shell peanuts, to tell stories, and peel yams and discipline squabbling toddlers. It's the everything zone. If the house is the shell, the mat is the living, beating heart. Right now, you find yourself sitting cross-legged with 3 women and a small herd of children. One child is carefully unbraiding another's hair tongue between teeth in deep concentration. Another is pounding something vigorously in a small mortar that looks like it's been handed down from the Bronze Age. You're holding a basket of beans and trying not to drop them. Laughter surrounds you, as easy and constant as breath. Someone teases you in Wolof. You don't catch the words, but the tone says, "Look at this poor city child trying to peel a bean." You grin sheepishly. They're not wrong. You pause to look down at the mat. It's slightly frayed at one corner. One strand sticks up like a cowlick, catching on your shirt. You press it back down. How many hours of labor went into this rectangle? How many people have sat here over the years? Historians still argue whether such communal mat usage was born from necessity or cultured in scarcity of furniture. Create this lifestyle, or did the lifestyle resist the arrival of chairs and sofas, even when they became available? The truth, as usual, is probably a comfortable swirl of both. What's certain is that the mat works. It's democratic, no high seats or low seats. Everyone's hips rest on the same surface. Hierarchy shows up subtly. Who sits near the head of the mat? Who's invited to recline? Who gets the bowl of cola nuts first? But still, the distance between elder and child, guest and host, man and woman, it shrinks here. Quirky fact. In some communities, a guest's status could be subtly measured by the mat he or she was offered. A finely woven one with symmetrical borders, high respect. A tired, patchy mat with curled edges. Let's just say you might be overstaying your welcome. You'd never know unless you'd grown up with the code. Right now, though, you're on the good mat. A small one was quietly nudged under your knees when you joined. And even though you've spilled half your beans into your lap, no one seems to mind. This too is part of the rhythm. Children curl on the mat to nap. A grandmother fans herself lazily. A teenage boy hunches over a phone, somehow balanced between this analog world and a digital one. The mat holds them all, no complaints, and it's quietly political too. There's power in this unassuming square. It flattens difference, centers togetherness, even when people argue over whose turn it is to fetch water, or whether so-and-so should be marrying that cousin. There's something anchoring in, arguing, while seated together on the same woven ground. It's very hard to storm off in a huff when your legs are tangled in someone else's. You've begun to notice the craftsmanship more now. Each mat's pattern has a personality. Some are tight and rigid, as if the weaver was in a no-nonsense mood. Others swirl with artistic flair, colored fibers woven into spiral borders. Some are wide enough for a whole family, others just enough for one dignified elder and a cup of tea. By late afternoon, the mats become miniature stages. A young girl stands on hers, reenacting a folk tale, complete with different voices and dramatic gestures. Her audience claps at the end, but no one leaves their mat. They just pat the ground beside them, inviting her to rest. You stretch out, supporting your weight on one elbow, and let the scene blur a little. The chatter fades into a background lull. The scent of fried groundnuts hovers in the air. Somewhere behind you, a radio hums a low-life rhythm. A rooster yells his disapproval of something long since past. And you think, you could live like this. Not forever, maybe, but long enough to understand. Long enough to trade the hard edges of chairs and screens for something softer, warmer, more human. Because this mat, this humble, scratchy, earth-scented square's doing more than giving you a seat. It's teaching you how to be present, how to belong, even temporarily, how to share space, share heat, share breath. You close your eyes for a moment. Someone places a small cup of hibiscus tea beside you. Another child lays their head against your thigh. No one asks anything. No one hurries. The mat holds everything. It always has. Evening winds carry the scent of charcoal fires and drying mango peels, and the village begins its slow surrender to dusk. You think you've seen all the mat can offer, but just as you're settling in for another round of relaxed people watching, someone begins unrolling a new mat. Not for sleeping, not for snacking. This one's for spirit work. You sit a little straighter, because here's the unexpected twist. The same mat that cradles your nap, catches spilled beans, and cushions gossip can also serve as a sacred threshold. This one is different, woven tighter, slightly smaller, edged with dyed bands that look like faded blood red and ash black. It's laid down with care, not tossed. A woman kneels before it, then waves a palm frond over the surface like she's brushing away invisible dust. She doesn't speak. Her hands do the talking. You've stumbled into the quiet overlap between the physical and the spiritual, where mats become more than mats. A divination ritual is beginning. In many parts of West Africa, particularly among Yoruba, Akan, and Sira traditions and others, woven mats serve as designated spiritual surfaces. Not altars exactly, more like neutral zones. Space is cleared of worldly clutter, where ancestral spirits, gods, or other energies might be coaxed into presence. The diviner may be a babe, maybe a marabout, maybe just someone's quietly powerful anti-sites with tools, stones, shells, strips of bark, sometimes just a bowl of water. Each item is placed on the mat deliberately. The mat itself marks a separation from the ordinary. Once you're on it, or even near it, you're somewhere else. Historians still argue whether mats were originally seen as containers of power, or simply the cleanest available surfaces for ceremony. But oral tradition is clear. When the mat is laid down like this, you don't step on it unless you're invited. And even then, step lightly. You're beckoned closer. Not to participate, just to observe. The woman begins flicking cowrie shells, her eyes half-lidded, her voice low. The shells clatter against the mat, slide, stop, form shapes, A young man kneels nearby, waiting for an answer. You don't know the question, but the tension in his shoulders tells you it's not small. The ritual lasts maybe 10 minutes, or maybe an hour. Time feels suspended. Eventually, the woman nods, says a single word, and begins gathering her things. The mat is folded, not rolled, and taken inside. The man leaves, lighter. Quirky fact: in some traditions, a mat reserved for spiritual work is never allowed to touch the floor directly. It must rest on stones or raised wood, even during storage. And if it tears, it's not repaired, it's burned or buried. You don't patch the path between worlds. You ask someone quietly what just happened. The answer: he asked about a journey. She said go. That's all they'll say. But the moment lingers, because now you realize the mat isn't just woven from raffia or palm fiber. It's made from memory, belief, breath. It carries weight that can't be measured in grams. You start to notice other sacred mats in other settings. A small, square one tucked into the corner of a house, never sat on. Another used only when naming a child. One that's placed beneath the feet of a griot as he begins a long story, like anchoring the tale to the earth itself. Even mats used in death rituals, gently laid under the body, then burned with it, or buried beside it. Not always, not everywhere, but enough that the pattern emerges. Life to death, and back again. The mat witnesses it all. There's one mat, especially, that sticks in your mind. It's almost too thin, almost threadbare, but every night, before sleeping, the family elder insists on placing it beneath his feet for prayer. He sits there for minutes, motionless. He calls it his bridge. Later, you ask what he means. He grins, toothy and amused. You use a mat to lie down. I use it to stand between here and there. You're not quite sure what there is, but you understand enough not to laugh. Tonight, before bed, you lay your mat down with a little more care. You smooth the wrinkles, you pat the corners, and when you lie back, you feel something new in the weaves, something deeper than rest. The stars above twinkle, as if acknowledging a secret you've only just been allowed to glimpse. Tonight, you're not in a village or a bustling town. You're in a city, now big, bright, and buzzing with noise. But don't worry, you'll still find a mat here. In fact, you'll find hundreds. Because even as urban sprawl reshapes the skyline, sleeping mats quietly survive in courtyards, on balconies, and in the most surprising corners of concrete life. Your host leads you into a compact apartment block in Accra. It's late, but children are still playing in the stairwell, giggling with energy that surely breaks some law of physics. The hallway smells of fried plantains and laundry soap. Inside the home, there's a plush couch, a TV humming in the background, and a wide-woven mat folded neatly in the corner, like a loyal old friend. I'll sleep on that, your host says, casually, gesturing toward the mat. You blink at the perfectly comfortable bed down the hall. It's too hot in there, he adds, already unrolling the mat in front of a wide window. Plus, I dream better on this. The mat, it seems, is still winning even in the age of foam mattresses, mosquito nets, and Instagram-worthy interior design. Historians still argue whether this urban persistence is about nostalgia, practicality, or something subtler. Is it about clinging to tradition? Or has the mat simply never left, because it never stopped being useful? You lie beside your host on a guest mat, letting the city's sounds filter in: distant car horns, a barking dog, someone selling boiled eggs from a cart 2 streets over. Oddly enough, it doesn't feel chaotic. It feels rhythmic, alive. Just another lullaby in a different key. There's a curious twist to city mat culture. Its flexibility. In older village homes, mats might have set location-specific rooms, shaded corners. In the city, they roam. Tonight, it's unrolled under the fan. Tomorrow, maybe on the balcony. During Harmattan season, it'll likely find its way to the roof. You even see people sleeping on mats inside cars, flattened across the back seats. A quirky tidbit. Some mat sellers now make portable office mats, foldable pads with hidden zippers, designed for urban professionals who want to nap during breaks or avoid traffic by sleeping at the office. Yes, really. The rush hour is worse than my back pain, one buyer jokes. So I just lie down and wait it out. But mats in the city aren't only about sleep. They still serve all their other functions. Dinner surface, gossip lounge, toddler playpen, makeshift dance floor. You even spot one laid out in a hair salon, where a woman rests on her stomach while getting long braids installed. Her phone dangles over the mat's edge as she scrolls peacefully. In these cramped high-rent spaces, a mat is freedom. It folds away. It doesn't complain. And it holds memories better than any sofa cushion ever could. You meet a young university student who swears by her mat not out of necessity, but by choice. I grew up with one, she shrugs. Mattress dreams feel too heavy. Mat dreams float better. You ask what that means, and she grins. Try it and see. So you do. The mat feels cooler than the room. Not cold, just less clingy. You hear every creak of the ceiling fan, every soft rustle from the open window. You feel more connected, somehow, to the tiles beneath, to the home around you, to the sky you can't see, but know is there. The student's cat pads over and curls up beside your feet like a seasoned bedtime chaperone. You watch as she rolls onto her back and exhales like someone emptying a glass. This is her safe space. And then, just before sleep takes you, she says something you'll carry long after you leave. In a city that changes every year, my mat stays the same. You smile, because that's it, isn't it? The mat isn't resisting modernity, it's accompanying it. Silently, softly, with just enough give to absorb the noise, but not so much that it loses its shape. And that's why, in the quiet pocket between midnight and morning, somewhere above the din of honking horns and flickering lights, the mat still dreams. The sun has barely risen, but the mat is already awake. Or maybe it never truly slept. You're back in a quiet courtyard now, somewhere between city bustle and village calm, a liminal space. Someone has already swept the ground, and the first kettle of water is hissing on a charcoal stove. A rooster sounds off in the distance, determined to prove he's still relevant in the age of smartphones. This morning, though, you're here to observe a lesser-known but deeply felt moment, how sleeping mats are passed down through generations, not just as objects, but as legacies. Your host today is a grandmother with careful hands and a laugh like tinkling metal. She beckons you toward a chest in the corner of her bedroom. Inside are folded mats, some in near pristine condition, others clearly worn thin, in places where elbows, knees, and dreams have softened the weave. This one, she says, tugging gently at a faded reed mat with a frayed corner, was your Grat-Tunkle's. He chewed the edge every time he had nightmares. You blink, way to her, Great-Tuncle. She chuckles. Not yours, just the household's. Family is wide here. She lays the mat flat and smooths the corners like she's petting a memory. He died young. But this, she taps the mat, this is still here. That's the heart of today's lesson. These mats carry stories. You thought they were just woven fibers, but each crease, each stain, each faded dye has its own tale. Historians still argue whether sleeping mats were originally seen as heirlooms or just everyday tools. But the oral histories tell a different story, one of quiet continuity. A mat might not be valuable in the economic sense, but it's priceless in emotional currency. Here's a quirky example. In some West African communities, especially among the Awe and Mand, a mat given at birth may accompany a person throughout life, from cradle naps to adult dreams, even placed beneath them at death. It's not a superstition. It's a comfort, a portable identity. You watch as the grandmother picks up another. Mat, this one dyed a rich rust red. I made this when your father was born, she says to her daughter, who's now in her 30s and sipping tea beside you. You wet it so many times I almost gave up. The daughter rolls her eyes and laughs. But you didn't. The mat is still intact. Later, someone else brings out a mat from storage. This one's different, thicker, stitched in bands of dark brown and cream. It was gifted to the household by a traveling griot in exchange for food and shelter one stormy night decades ago. The family never used it to sleep. Instead, they reserved it for honored guests and storytellers like a stage or a seat of truth. You're invited to sit on it. As you do, the family elder says, tell a story, any story. So you talk about where you're from, how your people sleep, and what you've learned so far. You describe the sensation of sleeping close to the ground, of feeling cooled by breeze and watched over by stars. They nod. One by one, heads tilt in recognition. See. Someone whispers. The mat listens. That night, you rest on another mat, this one simple, newer, but no less important. You ask where it came from. My cousin wove it, your host says, as a wedding gift. She said it should hold dreams of two people, not one. You're not even married, but the sentiment hums in your chest like lullaby strings. A final image, in a nearby room. A child sleeps on her own little mat beside her mother. She's curled like a bean pod, her feet poking out the bottom, one hand fisted in her hair. In her dreams, maybe she's flying, or maybe she's just watching the mat patterns swirl into story. You wonder what she'll remember about this mat, whether she'll keep it when she's older, whether she one day unfold it for a child of her own and say, this one's yours now, but be gentle, it knows all my secrets. In a world constantly replacing the old with the new, this one thing remains, the passing down of softness, sleep, and woven wisdom. And if you listen closely, if you press your ear to the mat, you might still hear a story being whispered into the threads. You wake up to soft footsteps and the smell of something frying, plantains, maybe, or akara cakes. The mat beneath you is warm with morning, creased just slightly where your weight rested all night. You stretch, not wanting to move just yet. You feel grounded, like the earth was your mattress and the air your blanket. You're not in a resort or hotel. You're in a place that's older than architecture and idea, passed hand to hand. Today, we look at how West African mats have made their way beyond borders, not just across rooms or towns, but oceans. These mats, humble and unassuming, have traveled farther than some kings. It begins centuries ago, during one of the most painful chapters in human history, the transatlantic slave trade. As millions were taken from the continent, some cultural artifacts and habits went with them. Not all were material. Some were memories, muscle habits, comfort rituals that survived in secret. Historians still debate how much of traditional domestic culture, especially objects like mats, could be preserved during such immense trauma. Physical items were often stripped away, but gestures endured. The way someone preferred to sleep low to the ground, or spread cloth in a specific way, or avoid beds altogether because they make your dreams too heavy. In places like the Caribbean, Brazil, and the American South, you can find traces of sleeping mat culture re-emerging, especially in rural or working-class communities. Not as direct lineage perhaps, but as echoes. Folded quilts on floors, woven straw mats, repurposed for naps. Fabric traditions that mimic the weaves of red mats once used on another continent. Later, during the 20th century, waves of African diaspora and migration, mats re-entered the global scene more deliberately. In London, Paris, and New York, you'll find African stores selling woven mats imported from Senegal, Ghana, and Nigeria, stacked beside shea butter, wax print cloth, and tubs of fermented locust beans. A mat, in this context, is no longer just for sleeping. It's a homesickness remedy. You visit one such store in a quiet corner of Brixton, South London. The owner, a second-generation Ghanaian-British woman, points out a pile of mats rolled near the door. Bestseller in summer. She laughs. No AC. Just unroll one of these and dream of Accra. A quirky fact. During the 1970s and 80s, several West African embassies in Europe reportedly shipped large bundles of sleeping mats for new immigrants as part of care packages, along with spices, textiles, and language tapes. Something familiar, one diplomat explained in a letter, to soften the culture shock. And soften it did. In apartment buildings, on student dorm floors, even in refugee centers, mats became bridges between continents. Folded in one corner, they were just luggage. But unrolled, they became territory, memory, grounding. You meet a Senegalese artist in Montreal who weaves his own hybrid mats from recycled plastic bags and banana leaves. My father slept on one, he says. I sleep on one, and maybe when I go, my daughter will lay one down and say, he was comfortable. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Modern design circles are taking notice. That's right. Interior decorators in Berlin and Tokyo are now calling traditional African mats eco-chic sleep solutions. You see mats framed on walls, used in yoga studios, featured in minimalist catalogs, under fancy labels like Organic Floor Lounger. You smirk. It's a little silly, sure, but maybe also a win. After all, the mat has never needed reinvention. It just waits for the world to remember it. In Accra's airport, a grandmother tucks a mat into her oversized luggage, alongside jars of groundnut paste and dried pepper. When asked what it's for, she grins. To dream where I land. That phrase sticks with you. To dream where I land. It's not just sleep, is it? It's belonging. A mat unrolled in a foreign land is a silent claim. I am here. I rest here. I dream here too. So tonight, as you curl once more onto this simple woven bed, whether in West Africa or far away, you carry centuries of softness beneath your back. The world spins, fast and loud, but the mat remains slow, still, and sure. You're almost at the end now, not just of the night or the narration, but of a journey. A story that began with reeds by a riverbank and wound its way through empires, family homes, cramped rooms, and quiet dreams. Tonight, you return once more to the heart of it, all not a grand palace or museum archive, but the intimate rhythms of everyday life. Somewhere deep in the Sahel, in a low courtyard shaded by neem trees, an elder is weaving a mat by hand, not for sale, not for ceremony, just because it's time for another one. You sit beside him, the late-day sun spilling like golden water across the courtyard floor. The process is quiet, rhythmic, one reed at a time, split and soaked and bent to purpose. You notice how the elder doesn't rush. His fingers move like someone winding time backwards. Every now and then, he hums a low, gravelly tune, wordless, but you feel like you've heard it before, maybe from a mat maker in a different town, or in your sleep. Here's the thing, sleeping mats are never really just sleeping mats. They are diaries, thresholds, hiding places, stages, and cradles. They carry more human stories than any velvet throne or golden artifact ever could. They don't dazzle. They endure. Remember that earlier mat, passed down through a family like a sacred scroll. Some communities in Mali and Burkina Faso even perform informal mat naming ceremonies for firstborn children, blessing not only the child, but the mat they'll sleep on. It's a gesture, yes, but also a pledge. This child will be known by softness. In other places, mats are used to teach. One grandmother you met marked the corners of her mats with colored threads, red for prayers, green for lullabies, blue for story time. She would point with her chin and say, "You want tales? Go sit on blue." You think about how many decisions, big or small, were made lying on a mat. Proposals whispered, futures imagined, disputes settled by morning light. Historians still argue whether the mat's cultural significance has waned in modern times, as foam mattresses and mass-produced beds flood markets. But ask anyone who's ever unrolled one beneath a mango tree, and they'll tell you, the mat is memory. A quirky fact to close: in certain Wolof households, mats are said to yawn when unrolled after long periods of storage. Not literally, of course, but elders might say, it remembers you when a mat sighs beneath your weight. And maybe it does. So here you are on the ground, but not low, rooted, wrapped in fibers and memories and voices. The mat beneath you may have been woven from grass or plastic or palm fronds. It may be old or new, colorful or plain. It doesn't matter, because tonight, you've become part of the lineage. You're not just lying on a mat. You're lying in history. Word count, 1045. Wind down, final 300 words. So now, take a long breath. Let your spine sink a little deeper into the mat beneath you, whether real or imagined. Feel how the surface molds gently to your shape, not forcing you to conform, not bouncing back, just accepting, as if it's always been waiting. You hear soft sounds in the distance, perhaps the rattle of a fan, or the hush of wind through reeds. Maybe it's a goat somewhere, grumbling into its sleep. Maybe it's just your own breath, steady and slow. Let your limbs go heavy. Let your thoughts wander. Think of all those who've slept like this before you. Generations stretched out under the same sky, on different earths, in woven softness that held their worries until morning. You're safe here, grounded, but light, held by centuries of care. If dreams come, let them come softly. Let them curl around you like the edge of a well-worn mat, familiar, kind, and full of whispers. And if sleep doesn't arrive just yet, that's okay too. There's no rush. You've already traveled far tonight. Close your eyes, or don't. Drift, or just rest.